And so in the period after publishing all these works in very, very short time, in these years from 1841 to 1846, he is like come to an understanding that the people can be very, very easily taken in for some ideas, or under the impression of some ideas that really put their faith and way of dealing with their human beings, their brothers and sisters in humanity, and in what he called the love for your next, in a way that everybody should be put into a kind of order, and nobody should stick out to be something special. This was like part of how people distributed the love for their faith and culture, to do so. And at the same time, he felt a lot of strange ideas on how the time have changed. And so in that time, he wanted to do something else and was thinking of becoming a priest, just retiring from being a writer, since he was now more exposed than he was before. And that also shows some kind of fragility and shallowness in his personality, and his sensitivity also to the public opinion that he was walking. He was walking among for all these years, and would be keep doing, because when you live in a town like Copenhagen, you cannot just like hide in a kind of in a village, or in a place where you are basically alone in between the fields. You're gonna meet people, and you're gonna go about talking to them, especially if they recognize you in the streets. So he had this idea that something in the time was not really right, and so he got like a kind of inspiration when a lady, and that was not really something that was very very widespread at that time, called Gullenborg, Thomasina Gullenborg. She published a book called The Two Time Ages. He liked that book a lot, and he wrote a kind of review of it of about 100 pages, where he really gets into his passion of expressing what he liked about that book, that it was really showing the difference between two time ages, that the age around the French Revolution, where people had ideals and had passion and wanted to show something special and lift the world up to a new stage and make the difference. And then a time where people just has lost these things and were just following suit, and it didn't have anything to believe in, and people were just kept down and kept their head down. And not only that, but also kept the heads down of everyone else who wants to raise a little bit up from that leveling that he was so much against. And so he could see a kind of fulfillment in this writing he published in March 1846. And one of the things he says about it is he is saying that in the time of the revolution, it was a lot of time for acting, and the time he was in was kind of advertisement. It was just annunciations. Nothing is happening. It's like it's just talks. And so he say, it's all like rooted in that kind of prestation of being envious and leveling everything. That established envy is the nivellation, and whilst the very passionate time had brought forward and brought up and led higher, this passionless time that is very reflected on itself is the opposite. It will hinder and suffocate. It will nivellate. It will put everything in a kind of mathematic equation that avoids any kind of raising above. It's of course difficult words to also interpret on standing foot, but just to give sense of that he wasn't finished writing, and he wasn't really satisfied with the outcome of all his efforts, and he could see that, well, there is something that he was not so much away from. And so some of his ideas went all the way back to when he was listening to his old teachers talking about that, philosophy and it is not just to explain reality, but also to change it. And this is an idea he also got from the way back time in Berlin, where he listened to Schilling in his days in the first and second trip, especially the first one. And so he had this idea with him all the time that it's about making the changes and about looking into life, how it is. And so in this last phase of his life, he's also changing, and there is a turning point in his life in 1847 that makes another deeper impact in his life of writing and thinking. And that is seeing another level behind the level of being passionate and believing in both life and God and religion. But it's like being that special person that someone can reach to be. The uniqueness will really stand out here. And he starts to understand that he has a role to play in that. But at the same time, in these last years, he is more and more looking into how the singular subjective person is being quickly attacked by the establishment and by the authorities for being different. And he saw that on his own, he felt that on his own body while being under the shooting line of the Kossar, and for a long time also from the people who suddenly became different in their way of behaving and seeing him as that author who had these leggings of two lengths. He wasn't really in balance with things. And so that's typically how it can be. But well, he started like looking into the passionate way of living that Christianity should be. And the reason for that, or the kickstart for that, was a very strange story, as it has been told, and also from his own diaries. A whole, really lot of pages have been used on a guy called Adler, Peter Adler, who had been like seeing visions and seeing himself as the new Christ and renewer of Christianity, a guy with some troubles. And so the bishop of that time in his area, Münster, he had been like necessitated to go in and stop this guy and take away his admission to be that person. And so later he reviewed his thoughts, and he gave up on that idea, saying that well, he received a vision that Christ has explained to him what the evil is. And that story in itself was so out of the way and special at the same time that it caught the attention of Soren Kirkegaard. So he went reading his 4 publications. This guy published 4 books about his ideas and thoughts and development that in a way outran Kierkegaard's books, or maybe was inspired by them, because they have been being published for several years before this, and this guy maybe have been reading in them. I do not really know for sure, but it seems like there is some kind of usual inspiration that is both sides. And so Kierkegaard sees this special person who has gone over the edge in that uniqueness in a very strange and wrong way. And at the same time, he could see how the establishment by the bishop and the Christian people reacting to this guy's deep felt Christianity at the same time. And so in many ways, he was very much perplexed by this incident and this guy. And he meets with him at one point, and this person, Peter Adler, there, he tells him, well, you are like Johannes the Baptist, and I am like the Jesus Christ figure. And well, Kierkegaard didn't take it too seriously, but said to him, yeah, well, I like the way we have shared the burden here, and went on like to keep thinking and looking at this side of this person. And so he wanted to publish a lot about it, but he kept it in his journals because he was very sensitive that he shouldn't get caught in a new wave of journalism and this Korsar newspaper that was criticizing men, waiting for every movement. At the same time, he did not want to make fun of this guy or make him look small or strange. But he was very much keen on understanding what is it that made him intrigued by this? And so maybe it's about what he says later, the difference between a genius and an apostle. He was writing about these issues. This is a religious issue that won't matter much to some of us who are just living the ordinary life. What is an apostle and what is a genius? I'm not sure people even really knows what the words are anymore. But from his point of view, it's like talking about what is the special, clever person who has the spirit of being very special in the way he sees and views life. And then the apostle, the one who is just following the message, receiving like some kind of inspiration somehow, or reading the text very closely, or just imitating the big spirit. And so it was like a kind of turning point in 1847 that he says so himself. He said it was a turning point in my life, getting this failed figure into the picture. And in many ways, this made it like a present to him, even though this person had failed miserably and has been, clearly a strange coincidence of a person who was a bit out of his mind, or have been seeing himself as too big and too important than he should have been. And so he's now looking at what is it that makes the person go from being that extraordinary person to from that special individual person to becoming that extraordinary person. And now he starts talking about this extraordinary way of being that some persons can have or be in. And so it is the idea of the genius that now occupies him, and the genius as the big spirit in the time that makes the big differences. And so he's going to do that by going back and making that reformist critique of the church that's going to be understood as an attack and going to be seen as a way of that he is becoming a rebel, not really a follower of the true message. And between this and that, there is some special event in his life in 1847. But he finishes writing about this guy Adler in his book, saying, well, that this incident that happened there made me heavy in mind, but gave me that heavy-minded idea that I was more than ever determined on my position. And he's referring to that position he had in 1835 about he wanted to find the idea that he wanted to live and die for. Now he understood that he was that extraordinary person who could keep the balances and could speak without really getting so much out of line or staying in the conformist zone. So he went on working harder and harder to make these speeches in that spirit that he wanted to continue, so people could open their eyes to that possibility of faith and realizing themselves. And so at that time in 1847, May 5th actually, he becomes 34 years old, and he says in his book that, well, it's very strange that I have actually made it to 34 years old. It's for me ununderstandable. I was very sure that I was going to die before this birthday, and maybe I have been wrong in that birthday, but so it could be that I die as 34. And so he's maybe explaining why he has been in such a rush to write and publish and give all that he had, because he had been like somehow feeling that he's not gonna make it for long. He's gonna die young, maybe as the following of the curse that had befallen his family and his father over them, or whatever heavy-mindedness that has been over him in his life. And so he also had this idea maybe that he should die before he became 34, and so in that way match the age of Jesus, who died on that in that age, as it is told. And so it's going to be in this same year that he's going to publish the Acts of Love, one of his also later popular books on the idea of love and the different stages in it and the depths and situations that comes in life with love and how it communicates itself and how it is related to faith. And at the same time, from that year on, well, it has been the year where he will go back and look at his inheritance, his church inheritance, and what is it that Christianity has become and how it should be. And so he starts like writing more and more of these speeches that will give that idea of Christianity that he wanted to deliver. But at the same time, he goes maybe in another direction, becoming more and more revolutionary and attacking the authorities and speaking out about what he sees has gone wrong, where is the lost passion in that Christianity. And he will end well in 1849 by writing about sickness to death. And so it will be a period between periods for him from 1847 to 1849, where he has two big books published, and he starts gradually and then suddenly a big, what can you say, criticism, attack on the church. And he will have his last years where he, from like 50 to 55, starts revisiting some of these things that he has been through and trying to see that girl of his life, Regina, that has felt so much also in his writings and put him in such a delicate situation as to try and understand himself. And so we're going to follow him through these issues. But there is a very special case that happens here, that is the meeting with the king. He has a meeting with King Christian VIII, the king who died in 1848. And that king was curious about his subjects and the people living in the kingdom, especially those who had made a name or maybe had something to say. And so he invites Kierkegaard to a meeting with him, and maybe I will just refer to that meeting as it is referred to in his own writings. And so we have Christian VIII taking him into audience, as they say, and he had been waiting for long before he got to get in to meet him in person. And the king greets him and says, "Well, I'm very happy to see you. I have heard so much about you, so much good about you." And then Kierkegaard responds, "And I, your majesty, I've always said to myself, in the end, the man who will stand you nearest and best will be the king. And for that to happen, I must have one that has spirit enough and high enough that he couldn't be smallish to me." It's like he's referring to what has been happening to him between the public. And that's why he sees the king as the person who would stand nearest to him, because he has such a high spirit and standing so high that he would not look smallishly on him and he would not like make fun of him. And the king liked that a lot and made a gesture of recognition of this word, that he is like trying to say to the king that you are a special person and you are so high in spirit and in position that you're gonna be my best friend in this, because, well, you are above the rest as well. And then Kierkegaard continues, say, the only unlock for your majesty is your wisdom and knowledge. That is too big for the small country. It is an unhappiness to be a genius in a trade town or a trade country. And that's a very profound way of saying that sometimes a place can become too small for your ideas and thoughts or who you are. And the king responds, well, then we can do it even better for the individual. It's like he's tapping on Kierkegaard's own words about that special individual and that person that becomes himself. And you could, continues the king, leave me some of your ideas for the best of the country. And Kierkegaard replies, in my book I've already made an effort on that, but I will stay a private person. That is very determining. And then the king responds, okay, but for sure, but come and visit me again sometime. And Kierkegaard will say, Your Majesty, I do not visit anyone. And the king says, yes. And then I know, then I would know that you have nothing against that. I will call for you. And Kierkegaard say, I am your subject. Your Majesty has to order me, but it must be something for something. I have one condition. All right, and what is that? That I can speak with you alone. And in that manner, the king said goodbye to him and left him, and so called on him some months later, when the king was in his castle under the summertime, and he was in a great mood. And so he had this deeper talk with Kierkegaard, because when he met him, he was ready to continue the talk from where they left last time. And the king said, well, it's a long time ago I have seen you here with me. Kierkegaard replied, Your Majesty will maybe first and foremost allow me to do something understandable. I must ask Your Majesty to be assured that how much I really admire that courtesy that you are showing me. But I am sickening, and therefore I come only seldomly. I do not take good in my body that waiting in your front chambers. It makes me on edge. From now on, you're not gonna wait. Just write me ahead and I will receive you. I thank Your Majesty many times. Well, tell me, what do you mean about this communism we hear so much about? I am already worried. And Kierkegaard replies, well, Your Majesty, after what I have understood, the whole movement as it is now will stay a movement that won't become in touch with the kings. It will become a struggle between layer and layer, class and class, but that parties, these parties will forever have interest in all of them to be at the good foot with the monarch. And so they will have struggles like in a house between the living room and the cellar, and between these and those on the first floor, but they will not attack the host. The group, one should never go and struggle with directly, only indirectly. Just stand fast. Yes, a king should definitely do so. And this group, the group of people he's talking about, is missing education, is missing understanding. And what becomes in the big countries to violence, in Denmark just stays as naughtiness. And so they kept talking like this for a long time. And the king asked Kierkegaard if he wanted to be hired at the academy at Soro. And Kierkegaard found a way to say no thank you to His Majesty in a very polite way. And then he got a third visit altogether that same year in the fall, and we are in 1847. And so he had at that time been publishing the Acts of Love, and he brought an example with him to the king as a present of his new freshly book, and he read aloud from it, and the king was very touched, as he has mentioned. And so while he was reading from that book and talking about it, the wife, the queen, came in, and the queen said hello to him, and he was very touched that he said, I'm so sorry, or I feel so so bad that I didn't bring along two presents, two books of this. And the king jumped in and said, oh, we too can have enough in just one book. So there is a kind of friendship evolving here between him and the king. And so the king wanted also to talk politics with him again and again. And he said, well, give me your view on the things as they are on the street. And then Kierkegaard said, I will, but you have to let me talk very freely and straightforward. And the king accepted this condition. And so Kierkegaard started telling the king that he is too public and too outward and too much receiving for big and small and whoever. He's too much like, he should be a house mother that should keep himself a little bit in the distance and in the background and guard his power and honor a little bit more. And so he said to him, it's good to do so, and sometimes you have to make sure to be ill. That awakens people's awareness and likeliness. And so the king thought that was very funny. He said to him, oh, that's why you are speaking like you are like you are sick. You want to make yourself interesting. And that's what the king thought and laughed at. And so he asked him if he was going to go out and travel lately or soon. And Kierkegaard replied, well, maybe. And if that happens, well, it will be a short trip to Berlin. And the king said, well, you have very interesting people you know in that place. And Kierkegaard said, no, your majesty, I live totally alone and isolated and work the most when I am there. But then the king wondered and said, well, then you could have traveled to a small town called Smørum Ovra. And that's a very small village the king is mentioning. And he laughed at his own joke. And Kierkegaard said, no, your majesty, whatever I travel to Smørum Ovra or Smørum Nedra, it's like going to that village from above or beneath. And incognito, I cannot find a better hide than between 400,000 people. He means that when he goes to Berlin, he is more likely to be incognito among so big a mass of people in the town than in a small village in Copenhagen where he cannot really hide. Oh yeah, that's very true, says the king, but tell me now about Schilling. And so he goes on talking to him about the philosophers and the ideas that he is interested in, and they have these laughs together. And so he had this last visit to the king in 1847, and that king actually dies in January of 1848, and Frederick VII takes over, but Kierkegaard never gets to get any relation to him. That new king had very much liking of giving the people what they want, of democratic constitution and ideas, and he also signed the Constitution of 1849, giving the public representatives and changing the way of the rule in the country. It's all as part of what happened in the French Revolution and the 100 years that followed there. And so Kierkegaard was not really liking this way the king was going. He wanted him to stand fast on his rights as a monarch and his position and his way of being. And so maybe that put him a little bit aside. He's been defending the monarchy all his younger age and life, and has seen this kind of democracy and the people's mass voice as something that would distort the kingdom and the true spirit of it in different ways, and it would never really work. But that's the ideas of that time. And so in this like interlude, as we can say, he is somewhere between aging and getting slowly and closely to the end of his life with this very special height of visiting the king and having talks with him just shortly before he dies. And in the next, we'll be talking about one of his most important and most also popular work, The Acts of Love, and how he goes about talking about it. And then the years that follows, bringing us into the deeper criticism of the institution of the church and the way it's led and the lack of passion that he finds in it, and that people are not really living the way Christ has wanted his followers to live, or has showed them how to do, and so on. And so that will be the focus from this time and the next episode.